Hi, and welcome to my talk, How to Deal with Toxic People, Lessons from the Trenches of Open Source Development. First of all, some words to me. I'm Gina Heuske, also known as Foodle around the web, and I'm a 38 years old software engineer slash maker slash hobby baker and 100% nerd. What I also am is the creator and maintainer of Octoprint, which is a web interface for 3D printers. And I've been maintaining that now for 8.5 years straight. Obviously, during almost a decade of open source project maintenance, you can envision that I have seen quite a number of upsides and also downsides of project management. And today I want to talk about one of these downsides, which is having to deal with more or less toxic people during your everyday work. I'll show you some of the most common bad behaviors that I've encountered, and then provide some coping strategies whose goal is, on the one hand, to diffuse the situation, but also to pretty much preserve your own personal sanity when you have to face people like that. But first of all, let's maybe take a look at what common bad behaviors there even are. So, the most common one is probably entitlement. So people thinking that for some reason you owe them and only them something more than what you have already given them. And from my personal experience, this is usually down to a misunderstanding of the social contract of open source, which is not here have this program and now you get to demand everything else that you want as well, but pretty much just here's this project. You can use it. If it works for you, great. If it doesn't, then it doesn't. Also, there's often a misunderstanding of the realities of open source, which is that we are talking about projects being maintained by a small group or only one person, actually, often in their free time, because there is a severe lack of funding to do this work full time. And you see yourself what kind of let's say, statements we are usually dealing with as open source maintainers. It's sometimes really surprising what kind of nerve some people just have. Another often observed bad behavior is frustration, or rather the venting of it. So people who have run into an issue with your project or something related to it. For example, I also often get this with people who have a problem with their printer itself, which they then blame on Octoprint. So they have a problem, they are frustrated about the problem, they now want to blame someone and vent at least. And this someone then usually is the maintainer of whatever project or whatever open source project they happen to interact with at the time. And this situation is an especially tricky one, since often there is an actual issue at the bottom of all this. So there is a reason for this frustration now happening. There is a reason why the user ran into a problem, and this problem might be a bug or a missing feature, an actual missing feature that should be there, or just a documentation problem or something else. And as a maintainer, obviously you want to solve this because you want to be your product to be a good product. But on the other hand, you also want to get treated like that. And speaking of bad treatment, there's also the worst thing, attacks. Now, I don't want to repeat any of these here. Just rest assured that I've gotten all of these and worse. And sadly, attacks like that are really aggressive are something that as a maintainer sooner or later you will face. And sometimes it's because people are getting kicks out of trolling you and trying to get a rise out of you for fun. I don't know what kind of fun that is, but okay. And sometimes these kinds of attacks are also just the next step of frustration or entitlement. I guess it doesn't come as a huge surprise if I tell you that irregardless of the reason for them, they are never fun to receive. Actually quite exhausting and tiring, and it's happened more than once that after receiving one of these, I found myself questioning why I even do this to myself and keep on maintaining the project. Now, how do we cope with stuff like that? So the first instinct of people usually is to just jump right in and give them an earful. Because we've just been wronged and now we want to set the record straight. Don't. If you run into such a response to such a kind of behavior with a hot head, it will just pretty much look bad. It will make you look bad, and it will escalate the situation further. And it will also, frankly, only feel good for a short time until everything comes crashing down on you again. What you should do instead is, first of all, let off some steam offline. And by that, I mean actually have some physical activities. Personally, I can strongly recommend you to get a heavy bag for your office. That's what I did in January 2019. It's that one there in the picture. And yeah, ever since I have that thing available and just 2 steps from my desk at all times, my mental well-being has significantly increased. So I can really just recommend that. But of course, you don't have to get a heavy bag. Something simple like just doing jumping jacks, running on the spot, a brisk walk, or anything else that gets your heart rate up. Do some push-ups or something helps. And if push comes to shove and you really cannot do physical activity right now, then at least count to 100 and back down again. Now, why this focus on physical activity? Okay, so you've probably all heard of the stress of the fight or flight response. Basically, your standard human stress response cycle that was tailored towards reacting to something like a saber-toothed tiger in the bushes that is about to eat you, and that is now also sadly triggering when you encounter any kind of threat to your person or to your mental health as well. And any kind of the behaviors that I just showed will trigger that thing. Some more, some less, but all of them will. And that means that your brain will start pumping some adrenaline into your bloodstream, increase your heart rate, increase your breathing, and in general prime your body for physical exertion. So having to flee from scene, basically, or having to combat something. And your brain will continue to do that as long as it hasn't seen you actually respond to this priming by using the resources that it has just provided you with through physical activity. When you do not use them, you will pretty much get stuck because of a feedback loop of your brain, which will be like, hey, why don't you run away? I told you here's a threat. And so you will continue to come back to the situation. It will get stuck in your head. You will run over it over and over. You will stay angry and upset. You will not be able to let it go. I've done all of this several times before I learned about the stress response cycle properly. So trust me on this. This isn't fun. Instead, what you need to do is to actually use these resources that your body has just given you and use them for physical exertion. So just run run in place, do some punches on the heavy bag, stuff like this, and that gives your body a chance to calm down again and gets your head back into a gear. And in general, this is not just useful to know and to figure out how to do for maintainers or for open source users, but pretty much for everyone. So I can only recommend figure out how your stress response cycle looks like, figure out what you can do quickly to run through it and get it down again. And yeah, that will improve your life. It's a life pro tip pretty much. Okay, and so once you've actually cooled down again, then you can actually respond. But how? So, first of all, you cannot and you should not ban everyone just because they are frustrated right now. It just sends the wrong message, really. Instead, what you should try to do is first de-escalate the situation, but also remind people of realities and boundaries. What do I mean when I talk about realities here? So, the realities are that open source doesn't give anyone the right to demand anything, and they need to be made aware of that. It is instead based on collaboration and cooperation. And that means that users need to do their part in solving issues or getting features implemented. And not everyone can code. I totally understand that, and I'm not talking about just code here. There are more things that help moving a project forward. For example, you can just be a part of the community and help others having problems, help them walk through that and help with support. Helping with issue analysis. If there are some bugs being reported, you can do your best to try to reproduce them and figure out how to trigger them, how not to trigger them, things like that. And in general, just also when you are reporting problems yourself, providing maintainers with everything they need to solve a problem proactively instead of having them constantly ask you. If there is an issue template, fill it out. If there are contribution guidelines, read them. Things like that. That is stuff that really helps maintainers and helps to put pressure off their shoulders. And doing that pretty much helps everyone, including yourself. The likelihood that stuff gets fixed by or implemented also increases, because a maintainer who doesn't constantly have to run after logs or has to field problems from other people which just boil down to support questions has more time to actually develop things. And explaining that to people is reminding them of the realities. What you should not do, in my personal opinion, is the classic passive-aggressive patches welcome message, because that pretty much just makes it sound like code is the only form of welcome contribution, which you do not want, because as we just saw, there are tons of ways how everyone can help with an open source project. And as I noted, it is also a very passive-aggressive kind of statement that will probably just further escalate the situation instead of de-escalating it. There's one exception for that, though. If there is someone coming in and saying something like, why isn't this implemented yet? I could do that in 2 hours. In such cases, I will say, hey, be my guest. I'm looking forward to your contribution. Because if someone is pretty much passively accusing me of being a bad developer and not knowing my project well, then they can also do the legwork, in my opinion. Also remind them of boundaries. Telling people that they've overstepped them or overstepped boundaries is very important. First of all, a ton of them don't even notice when they overstep them, especially when they are in this frustrated or entitlement blind mode where they just are focused on themselves and do not even notice how they are behaving. And in these cases, I've gotten a surprising number out of apologies. A surprising number of apologies out of just saying, hey, I understand there's a problem here. I really want to help solve it, but this, how you are currently communicating with me, is not how I'm going to work with you. So you need to fix that first. And afterwards, we had some constructive exchanges that then helped in solving the problem. Obviously, that does not work if you are still in attack mode yourself. So see above for completing the stress response cycle. And if you cannot find the right words to show these boundaries and also to show the realities of open source, then if push comes to shove, just link people to Brad Cannon's amazing post, The Social Contract of Open Source, which pretty much lines out all of this out with some good examples as well. So you've done both and the abuser still doesn't back down? Well, you can do other stuff as well. You can refuse to work on a problem if it only affects the abuser itself. You can point them to the door, and you can swing the ban hammer, of course. The most important thing here really is you do not have to take the abuse just because you're a maintainer. And for the sake of the project, you really also shouldn't. Now, all of this was pretty maintainer focused, but what can the community do to help deal with toxic people as well? A lot of people, especially from the old guard, will tell you that this is just how open source maintenance is, and you just need a thick skin as a maintainer or stop being a maintainer. And this is not something I agree with at all. I think we all can call out bad behavior when we see it, and we probably will notice when we see it. We can remind people of a code of conduct. We can remind people of unwelcome tone and attitude. We can flag and report bad behavior, and in general just step up for better treatment of each other. We do not have to leave this to the maintainer as well. Don't escalate the situation, but speak up, downvote, report. In general, just say, not like this. And always remember yourself that there are humans on the other side, even if you're frustrated, even if you're angry. That was the show. Thank you for your attention. You can find me on Twitter under @Fusel, and I will also upload the slides of this talk to octoprint.org/slides if you want to take another look at them. Also, thanks to all these awesome people for sharing the pictures that I used in this talk on Unsplash. Bye!